Hi, I'm Anthony Arvin, and welcome to my studio. I thought for this video I would discuss something that I've kind of touched on in other videos, but I didn't really go into much detail, and that is the concept of cross-hatching on pen and inks. As I had mentioned before, printing presses for hundreds of years were not able to print gray. They would use black ink on paper, and there was no in between. But if you look at a black and white photograph, you got a little bit of black, a little bit of white, everything else is some shade of gray. And since the printing press couldn't print gray, they had to come up with ways in order to create the illusion of depth on an image that the illustration, say in a newspaper or an advertisement or whatever, in order to make the image appear to have some depth to it, not just be two-dimensional. They used a technique called cross-hatching. And cross-hatching is, at its very basic level, an attempt to simulate a gray, but it's simple black lines, so the printing press could accurately reproduce it. So when an artist does cross-hatching, what he's actually trying to do for an area that he's trying to make appear gray, he'll put in parallel lines, and those parallel lines are actually serving the purpose of blocking some of the light that would bounce back off of the page. The more ink you put in those lines, or the closer you put those lines together, the less white is allowed to bounce back off of the page. So the darker the gray would appear when you see it. However, since they are black lines, the printing press could replicate them fine. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, they developed what's called a halftone screen, where they could change an image to dots, and then those dots could be faithfully recreated on the printing press, and those dots were how they controlled gray. But for hundreds of years, like from the mid 1400s to the late 1800s, they didn't have halftone screens. If you had an image in a newspaper, it was done with pen and ink or engraving, and they manipulated the appearance of gray through the use of these lines. On cross-hatching, I will put in parallel lines, and in order to control how dark they are, I'll either make the lines fatter or I'll put them closer together, and then if I need to make them even darker, I'll rotate another set of parallel lines at a different angle, and I'll continue to build on this and do that many times sometimes. There are some places, especially like in dark fabrics, that there may be cross-hatching going 6 different directions. And it's all designed to put more ink down to allow less white through so that you're getting something dark. It's a little bit of trouble on the old printing presses, because often you work in something large and it's scaled down. Well, when you scale it down, those lines are getting even closer together, which allows less light to come out. So what was gray on your original turns out to be almost black once it's reduced. So there is a method and a trick to doing cross-hatching when it's going to be printed. But that's in the long and the short of it, what cross-hatching is. And it's actually a very valuable tool to the illustrator or to the artist who's doing pen and inks. In fact, I actually developed, using a CAD program I had from back in my engineering days, I used a CAD program to create these paper guides that give me parallel lines at different distances apart. So when I'm actually using my ruler and I'm going in and putting in my parallel lines, I can move the ruler consistently the same distance, at least as much as possible, while still doing it by hand. And if I want something darker, then I choose one of these guides that has the lines closer together, or I switch to a fatter pen. And that is partially determined by the texture of whatever I'm working on. If I'm working on skin, I don't want a big bold line. I want something very faint and very fine. So I use a super fine tip and put the lines close together. Then I can get smooth things like skin texture or water, things where you don't want a rugged surface. If I'm doing a flannel shirt or denim jeans or something of that nature, then I can use a fatter pen, and it actually adds to the texture. It actually adds to the realism of that fabric. But the cross-hatching is how we created three-dimensional images, like I said, for hundreds of years. And I just felt like at some point I needed to address that in these videos, that I touched on it but not really gotten into any detail. But anyway, I hope that was informative, and I'll see you on the next video. Thank you for visiting my studio.